Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the first full day of SSP's 40th annual meeting. Hope you all enjoyed yesterday's keynote, the opening reception, and if you made it to the Navy Pier, hope you enjoyed the party. We started the party with a rainbow. We ended with fireworks, so it was really a perfect evening. We have a lot of great content to share with you today. Just a couple of housekeeping items, though, and then I will get out of the way to have our plenary speaker introduced this morning. But just as a reminder, if you haven't already downloaded the app, please do so. We will be using it tomorrow morning in the plenary session. There's a voting feature, and we will be asking you to vote tomorrow morning for during that session. So please download the app if you haven't already. Don't forget there's a photo booth for headshots, and if you'd like to sign up for that, you can do so at the reception, at the registration counter downstairs outside of the exhibit hall. And please do join us at noon today for the awards luncheon. It's a really nice event. We'll have the SSP business meeting, and we'll also do the awards presentations and things like that. So hope you'll join us for that. Anyway, have a great day. I am going to turn this over to not Kaysen today. Today it's Laura Ricci to introduce our speaker this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, and welcome everyone to the Crossroads City of Chicago and to the SSP 40th annual meeting. The annual meeting program committee started this year with a special challenge. As we began planning this year's meeting, we knew we had a unique opportunity to celebrate a milestone as we look back at the past 40 years of scholarly publishing. And we also knew that this works in the opposite direction. This is a moment that we will look back on at the 50th anniversary meeting and think about how far we've come. Now, one common theme of the past and the future is how are we going to talk about all of this? How are we going to capture what it is that we and our researchers and our authors do all day? And how do we make it feel meaningful to other people outside of this room? And we're very pleased to have a keynote speaker this morning who has spent his career doing just that. Steve Mirsky has been writing about science ever since receiving the AAAS Mass Media Fellowship in 1985. It was the first of many fellowships and accolades, including a Knight Science Journalism Fellowship at MIT in 2004-2005. Today, he is the author of Scientific American's Anti-Gravity column, where he has been informing and entertaining readers since 1994. And besides being a writer, he's also an accomplished podcaster. And he has hosted over 450 episodes of the Science Talk podcast and thousands of episodes of the 60-Second Science podcast over 12 years. So when Steve talks about science, people are listening. And this morning, he's here to speak with us about what he's learned about sharing so much knowledge with others, and in the process, how he makes the science and scholarship that is the work of our industry sound kind of fun. So please join me in welcoming this morning's keynote speaker, Mr. Steve Mirsky.
Hi, everybody. I didn't know it was possible to be an accomplished podcaster, but I'll take it. I always tell people, ever since I was a little boy, I wanted to be a podcaster. Back in the 60s. So it's great to be here. It really is great to be here, especially since I had a 5-hour flight delay at JFK yesterday. So I'm very happy to be here, and I hope we'll have some fun this morning, and we'll get into some things, some of which you probably already know, and almost all of which you're probably already employing in a lot of different ways, but it's really good to actually know them consciously, these things we're going to talk about. So it's long been our dream to learn while you sleep. Unfortunately, you can't do it. However, you can learn while you nap. Just last week, I had the opportunity to go out to Stony Brook University on Long Island and learn how to make flint stones. I'm sorry, that's probably for me. This fellow here, John J. Shea, who told me it's okay to tell this story, He was working on this book, and he said that whenever he would laugh while he was writing, his wife in the other room would say, "Take it out." So I said to him, "And how much did you take out?" And he said, "About half." I said, "That sounds about right." And that does sound about right to me. I just wanted you to see the beautiful hand axe that he actually made. That's my hand, but he made the axe. All I was able to do was a couple of edges that could really hurt you. So, take it out, leave it in. This was my organic chemistry textbook from 1980-81, Morrison and Boyd. I don't know if it's still being published in the 23rd edition now or something. Maybe somebody out here actually publishes it. But all I remember from it, the only thing, I remember some principles, but the only thing I remember as a line is this line in the middle. We must remember that everything, except of course a vampire, has a mirror image. Talking about chiral molecules. So, it's almost 40 years, but I remembered that, and when I was prepping this talk, I went to find it, and it's the only thing in the book that's funny. And it's a dad joke, as we would call it today, but I remember it was almost thrilling to come across it as a college undergraduate, like, wow, they actually put something humorous in here. And I never forgot it, and I think that's a lesson that these little bits of humor and other things that might be a little unexpected can be so memorable that and fortunately with the web, I didn't have to go page by page through the book. I was able to Google, except a vampire in Morrison and Boyd, and it came right up, and I was able to find what page it was on. So we're going to get to, the title of the talk had to do with Cialdini and his 6 principles. We're going to get to that, but I want to tell you the backstory. So I'm at the AAAS meeting, American Association for the Advancement of Science, back in the year 2000, and there was a session on baseball, and I'm a big baseball fan. I root for a particular team. I'm not going to mention who they are, but I'm from the Bronx. And one of their players had a big day here in Chicago in 1932 when he allegedly pointed. I hear that, that's right. I hear the Boston people. So Tom Boswell was one of the speakers. Tom Boswell, one of the great names in American sports writing. And Boswell talked about the fact, I think he said it's a while ago, but I think he said his wife was a social psychologist or something and was talking to him about this fellow Cialdini. And he sounds like a magician, the great Cialdini. And in some ways he is, but Cialdini, according to Boswell's wife, Joe Torre, the manager of the Yankees, who had great success, according to Boswell's wife, was employing Cialdini's rules in how he managed the team, worked with the press, all kinds of ways. So I said, I got to find out about this Cialdini guy. And here's a quote from Joe Torre that kind of encapsulates a lot of what we're going to talk about. You don't win, you don't try to win, you try to do these other things, and winning then is the result. So I got this book, Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Cialdini. On the left is his biography from the Scientific American article that ensued over the course of the next few months. Let me see if I can you see the very bottom? Too bad. It's cut off a little bit. Anyway, he talks about all his different inspirations, having a lot of different cultural influences. Anyway, so I read the book, and I got in touch with Cialdini, and I said, we have to do an article for Scientific American. One little digression, one of the other speakers on the baseball panel at the AAAS was this fellow, Dave Baldwin. Here he is pitching for the Seattle Pilots, who are now the Milwaukee Brewers, in 1969. After his baseball career, Dave got a doctorate in genetics. He got a master's degree in systems engineering and a doctorate in genetics. He's also an accomplished artist. That's a painting that he did that is hanging in the Baseball Museum and Hall of Fame in Cooperstown. So Dave got to Cooperstown, even though his baseball career topped out as a Milwaukee Brewer with him making $13,000 a year in, I think, 72 or 73. Dave is a super nice guy. He just had his 80th birthday. So I wrote about Dave, and here is a picture of him pitching for the Washington Senators and another one of his artworks. And I just want you to know who reads Scientific American. So this was one of the first columns I did where we wanted a photograph of the author. This is back in, I think it was 2000. Yeah. So digital cameras were brand new. And I got a cheap digital camera, and I took a picture of myself, and we used it for the first couple of months until we got pro headshots. And we needed to give a photo credit. So I don't know if you can see, but on the bottom left of the photo, there's a credit in, I don't know, 2-point type, 1-point type, Mervyn Stykes. Mervyn Stykes is an anagram for my name. So I just want you to know who the readership of Scientific American is. 4 people wrote to me to tell me that they figured out that I took the picture. Now, those are the people who actually wrote. I don't know how many other dozens figured it out and didn't bother to write. So Scientific American's readers they pay a lot of attention to detail. Let's put it that way. Anyway, let's get to the Cialdini. Why persuasion? And for you, why do you want to know how to persuade people? I mean, the bottom line is obviously you want to sell books, magazines, scholarly journals, but you also want to do really good work. I was looking for bookstore pictures, and this came up. I think this is a questionable use of some of the persuasion principles. I don't know what she has to do with the books. It's interesting that Under the Influence is top left up there. Anyway, I'd avoid this kind of persuasion attempt. But in addition to just selling things, what are your other benefits of knowing about persuasion? Well, that's an Adam, not Adam, guy who wrote Hitchhiker's Guide. Douglas Adams, right? That's his quote. So these principles of persuasion are going to come into play really in everything, but also for you specifically working with writers and production and obviously the people with the money. That's always good to be able to persuade them to share it. People in marketing here know about Cialdini? Anybody? Oh, good. Okay, good. So, and another thing is attracting. You want the best writers and researchers doing your stuff, and so you want to be able to cater to them. It's always nice to put out a little hot food. So the magazine wound up running this piece by Cialdini. I commissioned it, and I edited it, and I worked with Cialdini. I never met him. That's why he's sort of like the man behind the curtain. I don't even think I spoke to him on the phone. We did everything via email. And on the left, I'll give you a moment to read how we began the article. It's a bit of a departure for the Scientific American style, but within all that red print is sort of a giveaway of the various things that the article is going to cover. Just give you a moment. And highlighted in blue from the beginning of the article are the 6 principles. And you can all read them, but, tell them what you're going to tell them, and then tell them what you told them. So, reciprocation, consistency, social validation, liking, authority, and scarcity. Let's start with reciprocity. You groom me, I'll groom you. We are evolutionarily like these guys. We grew up as a species in this social context, and reciprocity is the glue, or one of the glues, that keeps the social contract going. So you do this, I'll do that. You give me half of your apple, I'll give you half of my apple tomorrow. It's very important. I see from my little tour of the exhibition hall this morning that many of you are already experts at giving away free samples. They're not really free. I am going to feel, evolutionarily, I'm built to feel a certain obligation to reciprocate your largesse. One of the nice things about knowing these rules now is you can blow off that obligation because you know what they're doing. So you can take the Snickers bar from one of the exhibition stand desks and not feel bad about not even sticking around to talk. It's okay. Here's a study that just came out 2 days ago. Are they like the cutest things? So not only do they reciprocate, but they remember to reciprocate. The dwarf mongooses remember to reciprocate the next day. And the particulars in this study have to do with one of them will stand sentinel to make sure that a hawk doesn't fly in and kill everybody, and the other ones the next day will give that sentinel who performed that task some extra food. So they are also highly social animals. So it looks like any kind of highly social animal is going to incorporate these rules of reciprocity in their evolutionary history. Why, look, it's the University of Chicago Press, and they're giving out free books to people all over the country. I've been taking advantage of this for years, actually. So here's another example. Obviously, Amazon on the Kindle will give you free samples, and I don't have any data, but I have to believe that the number of people who buy after having seen a free sample has got to be encouraging them to continue that practice. And here we see a whole free book, which probably get me to pay more attention to the University of Chicago Press later. Now, with reciprocity, you get a sense of fairness. This is a fairly popular video, but if you haven't seen it, these are capuchin monkeys, and they've both been fed cucumbers. Each gets a cucumber in exchange for having completed a task, which is to give a stone back to the technician. Then they change, and one of them still gets the cucumber. One of them, however, gets a grape. And grapes are better than cucumbers, both to many humans and to capuchin monkeys. So I'll play this short video. It's about 40 seconds. The voice you'll hear is Frans de Waal, a very eminent primatologist who was one of the co-authors on this experiment. And he's showing the movie at his conference, so this is a meta movie.
Getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again.
You know, it's hilarious, but studies show that human beings would rather make $100,000 a year when everybody around them is making 50 than make $1 million a year when everybody around them is making 2 million. So, you know, we throw the cucumber back too. Now here's how you can manipulate reciprocity, this feeling of obligation to return the favor results in the kind of thing that you can read about on that slide. And obviously, you know, it's become a real issue with the perks that a lot of doctors and researchers get from their funders. Second principle is consistency. Actually, you know, I'm getting warm, and I wore this black turtleneck so I could look like another authority figure giving a talk. So anyway, consistency, public commitment. This is why I never sign petitions on the street anymore. If anybody calls to ask if they can count on my support in November, sorry, because you are then committing yourself to something. It doesn't guarantee that you're going to follow through, but it raises the possibility that you're going to follow through. The simple addition of the words "will you" decreased the no-shows for this restaurateur when people were making reservations. As you can see, the receptionist just said, instead of "please call if you change your plans," she said, "will you please call?" and waited for them to say yes. And the people who said yes were much more likely to show up because they had publicly made their commitment. Public commitment, I think, is one of the reasons why marriage is still popular, because we get together in public in front of our friends and make this commitment. I mean, can you imagine the pressure that these people are under? With the kind of do they had, I mean, they might hate each other's guts in 5 years, but I have a feeling they're going to stick together. Again, it's not 100%, as we've seen, but the pressure is really on. Another of the principles, social validation. Here's a famous Milgram experiment from the late 60s. One person looks up. They're not looking at anything. 4% of the passersby also look up. What are they looking at? And again, evolutionarily, the mongoose is looking up. You want to make sure nothing's coming down to get you. So this is on the streets of New York. Then they altered the experiment a little bit. And 5 people look up, 18%. Then look up. Resistance is futile-ish. You don't get 100% of people looking up, but 40%, that's a lot. Another of the principles is liking. I mean, hopefully you like me and you'll stick around. I like The Rock. I see rock movies. Yeah, we're getting some thumbs up. You know, do I watch a rock movie because, do I watch a The Rock movie because, you know, it's Laurence Olivier? No. I mean, he's not a bad actor. I'm not saying he is. But you like him. You like him. You like to watch the movie. And it's going to be fun. You know you're going to have a good time because you like him. I saw Melissa McCarthy. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the video. She came out on Colbert's show a couple of weeks ago. She came out from the wings, and the audience went berserk. And she had this smile on her face. And she just brought sunshine with her into the room. It didn't matter what she did. You just like her, and you want to be around her. And if you like people, you're more likely to comply with their wishes. Authority. Authority is a big one. This is from the Cialdini article that we ran in Scientific American. We all know who that is. President of the NRA back then. part of a lifetime. Do you get it? Do you get it? So the NRA back then was trying to bank on his gravitas as an authority figure. President NRA today, he's also an authority figure in certain places. More authority. Now, this guy has authority. He's former Speaker of the House. And I don't know if you know, but he recently announced he's going into the pot lobbying business. So, but do you really want to buy your pot from this guy or an authority? That's Tommy Chong, who has his own line of pot. And if I were to buy pot in one of the states where pot is legal, I would definitely buy Chong's Choice Cannabis. The man knows of what he speaks. Now, Ted Williams, obviously an authority figure. I have great respect for him, even though he played for the Red Sox. And there he is as a Marine pilot during either World War II or Korea. He was in both. And he was the manager of the Washington Senators in 1969 when our friend Dave Baldwin was on the Washington Senators. And I'm going to let Dave Baldwin tell you this story about Ted Williams and authority. Your manager with the Washington Senators at one point was the legendary Ted Williams.
Oh, yes.
and you being a pitcher, Ted Williams had sort of a, I don't think it was a love-hate relationship. I think it was a hate-hate relationship with pitchers.
Yes, actually, he considered all pitchers to be just incurably stupid. Ted wanted to get to know his pitchers, so he called a meeting. And he said, you know, pitchers are the stupidest people alive. He said that, and to prove that, I bet not one of you can tell me what makes a curveball curve. Well, you know, all of the pitchers knew what made a curveball curve, but all the rest of the pitchers were smart enough not to say what made a curveball curve. And I gave the explanation. I'd been going to school, so I thought I'd been called on in class or something like that, you know. And so I explained, all about the Magnus force and all the forces on the ball that would make it deflect. And I got through, and I thought, well, something's not quite right here. And there was this real awkward silence, you know, as everybody contemplated what I had done, because Ted was just bursting to give the explanation. And here I'd taken the opportunity away from him right like that. And this is my first interaction with my new boss. And so I was, considering other career options. And
so you inadvertently proved his point that pitchers really were stupid.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Or at least one of them was, you know.
So, respect authority. Another of the principles, scarcity. Now, this is what we are used to when we go to the supermarket. There's milk everywhere. Of course, before a hurricane, milk becomes a highly desirable commodity, and you're going to probably go in there and grab the last one if possible. But, scarcity is also very context dependent, because if there is no hurricane and there's one container of milk left and you look at it, you're probably saying, well, I don't think I want to take that. I don't know what's wrong with it. And, and that's why you mostly see supermarket shelves fully stocked. Makes it look more appealing. And finally, manufactured scarcity, another way that people might take advantage of these principles of persuasion. Limited availability, stuff that's really not scarce, but we make it scarce. The Disney folks a few years ago, I remember they were selling some of the movies. I think back then it was on video cassette even, and they were saying, we're never going to be offering this again, so if you want it, you got to get it now. So it's manufactured scarcity. And this is how we ended that article in the red again. So I really recommend the whole book. If you can't find the time for the whole book, I recommend this article. And Cialdini has believe it or not, a new book out called Persuasion that I haven't seen yet, but it looks pretty interesting. And he's co-author of another Scientific American article I had nothing to do with, coming out in a few months about how to combat anti-science thinking, which I think is a pretty important issue. And you'll notice that because I didn't want to disappoint you today, where he says, I'm going to throw in at absolutely no extra cost a set of references that you can consult. That's what you'll find over on the right-hand side of the screen. Those are the references that ran in the Scientific American article. So those are your 6 principles. I think that they're incredibly valuable in whatever you're doing, whether it's work-related, in your personal life, all over the place. Not to manipulate people maliciously, but to just understand the rules by which we interact with each other. At Scientific American, we employ some of these rules. Again, we've been doing it for a long time, not necessarily consciously, but now consciously, to inform and hopefully entertain at the same time. I do the 60-Second Science podcast, which runs pretty much daily. We've been doing that for 12 years. And here are a couple of examples that employ humor in ways that you might not ordinarily expect in a science piece. Now, one of them is not voiced by me. It's from a freelancer, and he pitched me the story of a study that found that if you use profanity out loud, you can withstand pain longer. So I told him, yes, I want you to do it. I want you to write it up, and I want you to litter it with profanity. And I'll bleep it out, but I want it in there. And I just want to play you there it is, the finished product. I better start with the other one, based on that experience. One of them is me. The podcast was only about 2 weeks old, and I thought we had a chance to do something a little different rather than just report science.
This be Scientific American 60-Second Science. I'm the Dread Pirate, Steve. I'll be taking a minute of your time. Today, September 19th, is International Talk Like a Pirate Day.
No, seriously, yo-ho-ho, check the web, it really is. And when they say talk like a pirate, they don't mean, for example, hey, can you copy these DVDs for me? No, they mean when you talk like this.
You know, matey, anyone could be a pirate. All you needed was a proper disrespect for authority and a willingness to be seasick for months at a time. But to be a truly successful pirate and not just the son of a biscuit eater, well, you had to know a bit of science, too. A good pirate captain had to know the astronomy to navigate by the stars. He had to be acquainted with meteorology and know enough fluid dynamics to make sure he didn't overload his ship with booty. And he needed the psychological skills to manage his literally motley crew. Your average pirate ship required a buccaneer surgeon to treat stab wounds and cat-o'-nine-tail slashes, and a swashbuckling general practitioner to make sure the men had the right diet to ward off scurvy with foods rich in vitamin C. Plus, your pirate optometrist supplied the men with eye patches, and of course, advanced veterinary practice. Well, what do you mean my time's up? I'm a pirate. I don't care if my time's up. Advanced veterinary practice kept your pirate parrots in fine fettle. So you see me, Hardy, no matter what your chosen path, science is sure to give you a hand. Or at least a hook. Thanks for the minute for Scientific American 60-Second Science. I'm the Dread Pirate, Steve.
So, I hope we made an actual serious point that there's a lot of science in your daily life, even if you're a pirate. So, now let's try to play the other one with the profanity.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Adam Hintertour. Got a minute?
Holy shit. According to neuroscientists from Britain's Keele University, dropping the F-bomb can actually relieve physical pain. In the upcoming August 5th issue of the journal Neuro Report, the researchers say swearing is a different phenomenon than most language. It activates emotional centers in the right side of the brain rather than those cerebral areas reserved for regular communication in the left hemisphere. The researchers had groups of undergraduate students submerge their hands in a tub of witch's cold water and repeat the swear word of their choice. And students could tolerate the icy abyss much longer than when they were only allowed to say more socially acceptable words. The researchers say the foul-mouthed students also had increased heart rates, which indicates that swearing activates a classic fight-or-flight response. You know, when you act all badass to downplay the fact that you're scared. The study suggests that swearing is an ancient social phenomenon with both emotional and physical effects, and also that socially acceptable words don't mean when your pain really hurts like a son of a bitch.
Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Adam Hintertour.
So, there's an example of just, you can do the same coverage straight, but I think the point of the study got across, and we had a little fun, and the audience hopefully was kind of pleased with the whole thing. So I'll take just a second to talk about, me personally and these rules. I do this anti-gravity column. We call it anti-gravity because it's the light part of the magazine. My authority, I've been doing it for 22 years. We hope you'll like it because you find it funny. If you don't find it funny, that's okay. I get letters from people who say, you're not really funny. And I know you don't have to, you don't have to read it. It's okay. There's like another 100 pages in the magazine. And Scarcity, it's the only purposely funny thing in the magazine. And this is the column from the June issue that just came out about this book that I highly recommend, which is called Does It Fart? The Definitive Field Guide to Animal Flatulence. It's important. It's an important contribution to the scientific canon. And Scientific American itself. I think one of the most important things that we have going for us is that we're certainly an authority, and maybe we're the authority. We've been around since 1845. I show you our commemorative edition of Nobel Prize-winning authors who have appeared in Scientific American, Volume 2. There's a Volume 3. We've had at least 140 Nobel laureates write for us either before or after they won the Nobel Prize. Probably not during, unless they were working on a manuscript when the call came in. And I just want to finish with Scientific American. I'll just show you the slide. So this is who we are. And I think that by taking a look at these rules of persuasion, it can help you in whatever you're doing, and especially in this world of distracted people who you're trying to get to pay attention to what you're doing. So I thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy. I think we have time for questions, if anybody's got any, or comments, or if you want to throw anything. The man with the microphone.
So is the audience for the podcast the same type of audience you get with the print magazine or with the website?
Our metrics are not as good as we would hope that they could be. I think they're going to be getting a lot better soon. But based on what data is available, what data are available, I should say, no. The podcast audience is younger, less necessarily science obsessed. We'll call it science interested rather than science obsessed. I mean, people who subscribe to Scientific American tend to be really into science or scientists. Podcast audience, I think, is much more general, and science is one of their interests. A lot of college kids, graduate students I know listen, and I've heard from high school teachers that they use the podcasts in their classes, and I've heard from people overseas. I know in China, for example, the podcasts are used to learn English. So the people are finding uses that we never even anticipated. So the audiences seem to be, I mean, I'm sure there's some overlap, but they seem to be discrete. Anything from the web? Nobody?
So as a small society publisher, we have our audience, they like us. How do we find new audiences to like us?
Well, you know, I'm not a marketing expert, but my first instinct is to say they have to know you exist, right? So you got to find some way to let them know you exist, and then give them something, a free chapter. You know, tote bags I don't think work that well anymore. But something that makes them pay attention to you. So that, you know, I don't, how you make them know you exist, that I can't help you with, but I think that's really the answer. I mean, you know, you might have to spend money on some publicity, I guess, but yeah, if you can just get people to acknowledge your existence, I think it really helps. The scarcity thing, in your position, you might want to wait till later.
Hello, over here. Behind the speaker.
Oh, hi.
What is or should Scientific American be doing explicitly to counteract the anti-science sentiment that we're confronted with?
I think we're doing a lot. I mean, I personally probably do too many podcasts related to evolution and evolution education for our audience's tastes, but not for my tastes, because it's my favorite subject, both the science and the sociology. We run a lot of articles and other multimedia about why people believe the things they believe. As I said, we're going to be doing this Cialdini piece coming up. We put people out in other forms of media to talk about it, and I think it's really crucial. We have to, you know what, I've been saying for a long time, way before the current situation, that Scientific American is the voice of the reality-based community. And I think we have to really embrace that. And there, you know, we're gonna piss some people off, but that's, you know, the price for playing right now is you got to be out there and say, no, I'm sorry, this stuff is real. Evolution really happened. Climate change is really happening. These things are real, and we have to figure out ways to deal with it, and we have to figure out ways to get people out there to pay attention and not think that we're part of some gigantic hoax to make money. I mean, it's really amazing stuff. But yeah, I think we do it every day, in fact. If you look at our website, you'll find all kinds of pieces about climate, about evolution, about studies about what orients people to believe certain things. So I think we do it, and it would be great if other people did it more too.
Hello?
Hi.
Oh.
No. I don't know.
Hi. Yeah.
Oh, hi. Sorry.
How do you feel that these principles could apply, or do they apply to more of a public engagement model in science? And in, you mentioned the podcasts are listened to by a different audience than the magazine is read by. And do you think these principles can be used to engage audience in more of a dialogue and co-creation of content?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would look to liking, be attractive to them in whatever ways that means to the audience, and also authority. Make them understand that we really know what we're talking about, and you're going to like hanging around with us. I think those two principles are really key for the kind of thing you're talking about. I think liking is really important. We want to be around stuff that we like. I mean, unfortunately, it becomes, I think, too important in things like elections, because frankly, I don't care if I like somebody, or at least I think I don't care if I like somebody. I might be fooling myself, but for a lot of people, it seems to be whichever one of them they like better is the one they're going to choose. And, that to me makes no sense at all. So these kinds of rules are, like I said before, are really important, because if you know them, you internalize them, it means you won't necessarily be victimized by them when somebody else is employing them. We had something back there?
Yes, we've got a virtual question from the web. This is Cambridge University Press writing in. And their question is, do you think the impact of these 6 principles actually varies depending on the situation, or are they weighted equally?
Weighted equally, well, they won't know. You won't be able to get an answer. Weighted equally with each other, or weighted equally by the situation? No, I think they're all they're all contextually based. Like the example with the milk. Hurricane, last milk, you want it. No hurricane, what's wrong with that milk? So I think every one of these things has to be judged within a particular context. If I see Charlton Heston, if I see Charlton Heston and the 10 Commandments ain't on TV, it's time for me to get some help. But if I see Charlton Heston talking about the things that I would trust that he's an actual authority on, like, for example, acting or being in movies, then I'll take him at his word. If he goes outside of what he really knows, and this is true obviously for everybody, not just Charlton Heston, then I'm going to have to be aware that just because he's Moses doesn't necessarily mean he knows everything about sports cars.
Hello? Hi.
Hi.
Hi. With technology and these kinds of devices, does persuasion, the principles of persuasion, continue to evolve?
I don't know.
I'm thinking generation, with generations, with millennials, and even going before that. So.
I tell you, I think, and I'm just spitballing here because I have not thought about that issue, but I think that these principles are based in our evolutionary history, and so therefore they are pretty much constants, but their application will vary and will be modified based on the technology that's available. I mean, there's so many other distractions now that might mean that you have to use them in different ways in order to get somebody to pay attention. But I think the principles are pretty rock solid.
Hi. Is this on? Okay. At the AAAS meeting in the February, Catherine Hayhoe gave a talk about trying to deal with people trying to understand climate change.
Right.
And she basically says that, you can't just tell them facts. You have to begin with, like, a common connection. And once you get that common connection, you can then help them to see the science within their world or their frame of mind. So liking is a little bit like, that's sort of, they like you because you found that connection. But when you're writing, like, at Scientific American are producing your podcast, you have a huge audience. So how do you think about that, about the liking and the connection to get, so you have the authority, but how do you get them to listen to you?
Well, you mean somebody who, for example, doesn't accept climate change? How do I get them to listen?
Right. If you're trying to build a connection and you have a very large, do you change your message? Do you use different mediums? How do you?
I always try to say to people that I'm not trying to ridicule your religious viewpoint. I have no problem with whatever you want to do at your private schools or in your place of worship, but when it comes to public schools and when it comes to policy, I think we really need to stick with what's verifiable, empirically based, and that's what I do. I don't know if that really works. I think I'm kind of fortunate. At Scientific American, we don't get a whole lot of people who don't accept these things paying attention to us. We do get people who write in to complain that why are we paying attention to these hoaxes? But, that's just some people who probably stumbled onto the magazine at the dentist or who read us specifically to send in stuff like that, or they're engineers. No, it's you're much more. If somebody has a strong STEM background, but they don't accept evolution or they don't accept climate, there's a much higher likelihood that they're going to be engineers than scientists, because engineers see the world as causal and designed. And so they have a hard time believing that, over 4 billion years through random variation and selection, you could come up with, what we are. But that's some engineers, not all engineers. So it's a really tough issue. How do you get these people? And I don't know if you ever get people who are sure that evolution and climate aren't real. You might get people who haven't really thought about it and have yet to make up their minds, or you might get their friends who then wind up persuading them slowly over the years. Although, I don't know, there's a study that just came out about time spent at Thanksgiving dinner with family members of the other political party. And the time spent, if you went to your relative's home and they're from the other party, you spent significantly less time there at Thanksgiving. You left early. So this is one of the big problems of our time. I wish I could tell you how to do it, but I think she's great. I think Catherine's great. She has authority. She has authority because, number one, she's an evangelical Christian who is a climate scientist, so she's got authority within the evangelical community, and she has authority within the scientific community on these issues. So she's a unique personality, and she does a wonderful job every day banging her head against this. And, she's great.
Hi.
Hi.
One of the challenges of this is that to translate the information into, to reach wider audiences is the cost. And what is the business model that you have, and how does that business model support the editorial resources that you put into this?
Well, the business model for the podcasts is we're a loss leader. We don't make money for the organization yet. Sometimes we have some advertising, but mostly we're there to attract people's eyeballs so that hopefully they'll then buy something else. And sometimes we just feel like it's an important thing to do, and so we're not all that worried with the cost of it. And, the cost is not that significant compared to in the old days when you needed a $2 million radio tower. I do these podcasts in my basement at home, and then we put them out on the web, and, their biggest cost to Scientific American is paying me, but we put it out there in the hopes that we're going to do some good and get some people to eventually subscribe to the magazine or do something else that benefits us, tell their friends. It's very multifactorial. So the business model for all these things, I think, is still evolving. I don't think anybody really knows what this landscape is even going to look like in 5 years. All I know is I get to keep doing my phony baloney job.
Hi. Hello. Hi. Over here.
Hi.
Would you share your thoughts on whether if something is free, if it is automatically less valuable?
It's not automatic. That's the thing. Again, this is context dependency, because free is part of the reciprocity thing. We give you the podcast, and we hope that you will then return the favor by paying attention to us, going to visit other articles on our website, spending time on the website has value with our metrics. So there's that. And then again, there's also the other thing. The other part of giving away something for free is that you take a risk of having people think that it doesn't have value. I hate to be unsatisfying, but I really think it's context dependent. I mean, if we charged 10 cents for the podcast, I don't know how well it would do. If we charged $5 for the podcast, it might do better than if we charge 10 cents. So, you have to do a lot of trial and error, a lot of research into these things. I don't really know what the answer is, but I do think it's an important question that you have to keep an eye on. Is it being free helping us, or is it being free hurting us? It's something that I think constantly needs to be reevaluated.
I've got one. Am I?
One more?
Hello.
Hi.
It seems to me that a lot of this comes back to listening, both on the side of who might be trying to persuade, because in the context you don't know which of the principles to emphasize if you don't listen, and then equally there's no point saying things if the other side isn't listening. And so I was wondering what you thought about listening as a potential seventh principle, on the one hand, and then secondly, talking about Kathy banging her head on a brick wall, would you like to see more reframing of science such that it listens more, so it reframes its message to achieve the goals that it wants, and then so that it engages people to listen with them?
Listening is vital. I'd have to think more about whether it ranks as a persuasion principle or whether it falls into some of the other categories. But if you recall the little clip I played of Dave Baldwin talking about his experience with his manager, Ted Williams, you hardly heard me at all. And that's the way I like to do my long-form interviews, is just, you might hear me every 3 or 4 minutes, and I try to make the question quick. Because, I don't want to be one of those people at conferences. You've all been at conferences, somebody raises their hand and they go off on a 3-minute exegesis on their thoughts about stuff and that nobody else is interested in. And, I bring in the authority figure to talk on the podcast, and I try to introduce them and then get out of their way. Might have to jump in every once in a while to kind of steer them in a particular direction, but otherwise I'd rather hear them talk than hear me talk. I moderated a panel in New York a few months ago that had some big-name people on it. Brian Greene, the physicist, was on it, and they wanted me to come out and spend 10 minutes introducing everybody, and I came out and I said, nobody came here to hear me, so let's bring everybody out. You all know who they are. So that's what we did, and I think that yeah, listening is really, I mean, it's vital. If you don't listen, the conversation goes wrong. And that's on a national level, obviously, we could say that too. What could science do? I think it's such a broad question, I wouldn't know where to begin to address it. But if we, what's the current term of art? If we bored down into it, is that what the marketing people say? If we drill down, there you go. If we drill down into it, and if we drill down and we connect the silos and we get really granular, maybe we could, and we want to be agile and jump from one drill hole to another with the silos as connecting matrices, then maybe we can come up with something that's actually useful. But I'd really have to think about that more. All right, you can go.